Welcome to the Globetrottin ADs. This podcast is for you, athletic directors, activity coordinators, coaches, and program associates based in international schools around the world. The Globetrottin ADs is proudly hosted by Nick DeForest from the American International School Vienna and Matt Fleming from the American International School of Budapest. Here they are now, Nick and Matt and the Globetrottin ADs.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Globetrottin ADs. We're getting closer towards our winter break, and for Nick and I, our departure from Europe to head back to North America to attend the NIAAA conference, which we're getting very fired up for. Getting ready to go have some good times in the warm weather down there in Orlando and meet up with some good friends and have some good PD, as we talked about in our last episode, and really getting excited for it. So how about you, Nick?
Yeah, absolutely. It's this week, and it's always a highlight, obviously. And we're glad to have someone we're going to meet in person while we're down there on the show today as a repeat guest. So Nathan Whitaker, thanks for being on here with us again.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it.
We've talked. We've sent out WhatsApps that there's a meetup in Orlando on Friday at the Celebration Town Tavern, which we could talk PD about, I think, but maybe more fun stuff. So I thought it'd be great to have you on here and talk about something a bit more serious before we have a few beverages down there.
Sounds good. And, if you're watching this and you have not gotten Nick's WhatsApp invite, it was lost in the mail, obviously. And so just show up anyway on Friday night because we'd love to see you. So, and I'm doing my best to get the whole state of Florida ready for you guys to come in. I'm excited to see, and you guys, we've got folks coming in from exotic places like Poland and Thailand and even crazy spots like Canada. So, so we're excited to get you guys all down here to Florida.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to meet you in person. Like, this is another one of those situations where we've come across where we've had people on the podcast and we've chatted and it's all virtual, right? But then eventually we get to meet these folks in person at some point. So I'm really looking forward to getting to meet you and shaking your hand and seeing how things go.
Well, that'll be great. And it's funny when Nick said that and then you followed up, I was thinking, no, I've met them and realized that no, we have not met in person. Right. So that'll be great.
But you have met so many people, right? So it's not just us. Like we'll talk about EARCOS and some of the other things later on, but there's tons of people all around the world that I know you've seen you in action before. So
yes, and tons of people around the world are actively avoiding having to see me in action again. So yes, it's a whole cadre of folks out there. But it has been fun to, why did we start this 4 years ago? Yeah. And it's fun to continue to interact virtually and then in person at times. And so this has been great to build into your community of Globetrottin folks and occasionally Globetrot myself. So
yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, we won't. We thought you should tell a little bit about yourself, but we'll put some links and people can go and find out, and they should check you out the background of you, because let's talk about something you organized just recently. I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe your biggest online thing since COVID was the art of playing well.
Yeah, I did my biggest, my only since COVID, before COVID. So yeah, I had it's funny. I don't have a clear sense of direction the way you guys do with this podcast, because I've had people ask me before, what do you think about doing a podcast? You've interacted with so many interesting people around the world or folks you worked with in professional sports or whatever. But I couldn't think of why did I want to get on every week or every month or whatever? I mean, what was I going to try to accomplish? And then I started thinking, all these folks, and then even well beyond the 15, 16 people who are on, have all given thought to what it means to play well in life. We often talk about it in the world of sports, right? And what are the values we want to take from sports? And you and I spoke, Nick. Actually, you were a guest on there because I wanted to save Matt for a future online summit. So I thought, well, let me get Nick out of the way. Now, but one of the things we talked about, right, is that if you're not intentional about life, about sports, about whatever, at least give some thought to it. you can, the values you're hoping to take from sports may not apply to life, right? I mean, if we let the kid get bullied or whatever it is, then they turn around and hopefully they don't turn into a bully. But so whether it's life, sports, whatever, I think it's worth being intentional. So anyway, that was the whole point of this online summit. It was really fun to do and to have interesting folks like you, and I appreciate you being a part of that.
Yeah, thanks. That was one of the most interesting things. It wasn't all about sports, or it wasn't all about coaching or ADs, how to work with your coaches better, or some of these things we do. It was really people from all over. I mean, a lot of sport, of course, background, but talking about life as a common goal. So it was interesting, really nice.
It was fun, and to your point about crossover and the like. I mean, part of what you guys do, part of what I think a lot of us who have come from this world of sports, at least if we're thoughtful, and of course, you all are in pulling together the Globetrottin ADs and this network and the like, is that these lessons, these things we're learning about team building, about leadership, about resilience, about whatever, are going to go way beyond sports, right? And so last week I was actually on a military base up in Virginia, speaking to the U.S. Army and their training and doctrine command about leadership and about the importance of mentoring others. And so I'm sitting there with an Army civilian at the table. There was a moderator, but then the other person who was on the panel with me, 2-person panel, was the civilian equivalent of a 3-star general. So they tell me that right as we're sitting down, right? And so I had this moment of, what in the world am I doing sitting here talking to the military about leadership, right? I mean, you got to be kidding me. And I'm thinking, I've seen Patton. I know how it works. These folks do leadership, right? And they study it, and they, and sure enough, we get rolling, and the other guy on the panel said, obviously we do so much and study leadership, and we do all this, but you've got so many other experience from different fields like sports that we can relate to and apply. And it's one thing to read it in a textbook, and it's one thing to talk about it on the fields of combat, but you guys have done it in sports. And so anyway, it's a great perspective to learn about life, to learn about other areas, to learn about, and you guys do a great job at that. So thank you.
Just curious, what would you say are the top 1 or 2 commonalities you would find between, talking with the military, high-ranking military folks who have a big-time experience in leadership and guiding people in serious life and death war situations, right? And sport or school leadership.
Yeah, one of the things that was really interesting that came out as we were talking. So we're talking about mentoring, and we're talking about humility, and we're talking about some of these other empathy, patience, giving people room to grow. And one of the things that came out, because I'm listening to this, I'm thinking this all sounds exactly like what we would say in any other environment.
Right.
And about halfway through, he said, look, the old Army, where we dealt with fear and intimidation, and you had to do it because we said so, and if you didn't, there were going to be major consequences. They said there are tiny, tiny moments when that might apply or be helpful, but they said even on the battlefield, even in combat, following people through love, through respect, because you trust them, because they're people of character. They said that's the new model, and that's what we've finally figured out over the last couple of decades. And I felt, well, that's exactly what we would talk about in international school and on the sports field, on the whatever. I mean, sure, you can yell at people and get people to do things, and I'll do it for a while, right, to make the pain go away, right, whether it's emotional or whatever. I mean,
right.
If coach yells at me long enough, I'll figure. But I'm not gonna be all in, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make the pain go away. But if you really want me to run through that wall, there are other ways to do it, and you got to figure those out. So anyway, that was a great question, Matt. And I was surprised to hear that parallel, and that they are being really proactive in weeding those folks out of leadership if they can't get on board with this new paradigm.
One of the key points there was trust, right?
Yeah.
Trusting in me being the leader and getting the ideas straight. And this is where we're going to go, and this is why. And you got to trust me and coming along with me. So we got to do it as ADs, even in our national school setting. It's a big part of getting our teachers and our coaches on board with what we believe is right in our programs and how we want to run them and what we want the kids to get out of them, the impact we want them to have from it, and the gains they're going to get. So that's cool to hear that you had that interaction and the parallels we can see even in our situation as being abroad.
Yeah. We have to almost do that every year, right? With new families coming in and new coaches come in. You can't just, rest on your laurels like, hey, I've been here 20 years. Everyone knows I do this and I care about people. It's new every year. You got to keep going.
Yeah, totally. Right. Like the elderly lady who gets in an accident taking a left turn, and she's like, wait, I've been making the same left turn to my house for 40 years. How does everybody not know this?
Yeah.
Right. You got to signal it for every new group that comes in, right? This is what we stand for. Here's our culture. Here's our values. Here are the signposts.
Right.
Yeah, totally. You guys have to do that every single year.
Absolutely. I just going back to what you said briefly, I think the Army needs to tell Hollywood, because every time you watch a show, or every time I watch it with my Austrian wife, she's like, why do they just yell at each other all the time? Why I wouldn't listen to someone that yells at me all the time. Anyway.
Oh, totally. And they even said to me, right? He said, hey, by the way, to the extent you're out there talking and speaking, whatever, make sure people know that this is not what they see in Hollywood.
Right.
Is not
Yeah.
who we are now.
There you go. Plug for the U.S. Army right here on the Globetrottin ADs. Who would have thought?
There you go.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
So we enjoyed it. The art of playing well. I, of course, enjoyed and was honored to be a part of it, but I enjoyed listening. Was there a favorite interview, favorite moment, something you were really proud of that stuck out to you?
Yeah, well, let's set you aside for 1 second,
Totally.
right? And let me have it be the other. So for those who didn't catch it, it was 16 speakers that I released over the course of a couple of weeks, me interviewing each one, and just talk about what does it mean to you to live well. And so there are 3 of you that came out of the education space, although you were a crossover sports and education, and a number of folks out of sports, and then a couple of musicians. So a wide variety of people, and so there were a number, I thought, that just had really interesting, insightful things to say. And some of the obvious, Tony Dungy, of course, was great, and he would be an obvious choice for some of the things. But one of the ones that really stuck out with me, it was Brian Shelton.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian was the former head tennis coach for the University of Florida men's team, and before that was the head tennis coach for Georgia Tech, their women's team. And he's the only coach to win a national championship in Division I in the United States with coaching both men and women. So great leader, great teacher. But Brian talked a bit about introverted leadership and what it means to be an introvert, and that doesn't disqualify you from leadership, that there may be some things you really bring to the table. And I think Brian clearly does. And things you might want to work to strengthen. But he also talked about authenticity. And I thought that was such an important point, that his son, Ben, so Brian has left the University of Florida to now coach his son, who's on the professional tennis tour. And his son is 20 years old and has risen to be number 15 in the country, number 15 in the world, after his first full year on tour. So he lost to Djokovic in the semifinals of the U.S. Open, and he won whatever the tournament was in Tokyo. I forget what that one was. But Brian made the point that Ben is the opposite of Brian, as far as Brian is stoic and quiet and thoughtful. And so you can never tell if, Ben or his team or whatever is down or up or whatever, just by Brian's expression. Whereas Ben is totally demonstrative. He's getting the crowd up. He's excited. He had the fastest serve at Wimbledon, fastest serve at the U.S. Open. And when those things happen, he turns to the crowd and he does this, and 147 mile an hour serve. So just incredible. But he won the tournament in Tokyo. And Brian said, I kind of wish he had lost. And I looked at him in the middle of this interview and I thought, okay, well, this is not the time to say, are you nuts? What are you saying? And Brian said he was experimenting with trying to be more like me. And Brian had reached number 55 in the world. And Brian said, you could never tell if I was ahead or behind. I was just always thinking about the next point and whatever. And he said he was going to be quiet and deliberate, and he wasn't going to get the crowd involved. And so he did that for a week, and he said he won, and it was great. And I was happy for him that he won. He said, but he didn't actually play his best tennis. And I told him afterwards, you've got to be yourself. And I think that's so true for us, whether we're competing, whether we're leading, whether we're whatever. Here in the States, we're always watching American football, right? And I've talked to so many coaches, so many people who are like, oh, I need to be more like Nick Saban, or I need to be more like whatever. Somebody who's just over the very demonstrative. I'm a great coach, right? I can't argue with the results he's had, but I'm not wired to be like that. And that doesn't eliminate me from leadership. I can still be effective. I can still be, but I got to be who I am. And if I behave like Coach Saban, people might follow me for a couple of weeks, but then they're going to go, this guy's a fraud. I think he's making this up. I think he yells. It doesn't sound right when Nathan yells. You're like, right. I remember one day looking in front of the mirror. I was like 15. And I looked in the mirror and I was like cussing because some of my friends were, and I'm using words and I'm looking and I'm like, everything looks ridiculous coming from you. And I thought, okay, there are just some things I probably can't pull off very well. Thankfully, it's those. But I think we've got to be authentic with like who we are and how we're wired. So that was one that really jumped out at me. I loved Brian's interview when he talked about, I wish my son had lost in the professional tennis tournament so that he wouldn't have behaved like me as much.
Well, that's a great point because, it takes a while, I think, for folks to be able to get to know themselves as leaders and then to be able to trust in themselves as leaders, right? So I think the more you grow through that, then you realize you can, I guess, kind of relax a little bit so that your true self can come through. And if it's a matter of your personality, it's going to come through your leadership style. It's a niche thing you have to find, I think, through the process of being a leader and learning from mistakes and then learning from your successes as well.
Totally. And to follow on that, there may be situations, right, where, I may be teaching 7-year-olds how to play basketball, right? And so I can't be as interactive and like, hey, what do you guys think about what we should do after a made basket by the other team? You're like, okay, no, here's the rule. They make a basket, we take it, we throw it in. I got to kind of lay it out for you. And I got to be, that doesn't mean that I'm a dictatorial type leader in general, but there may be times when I've got to be more prescriptive about here's what we're going to do, right? And yeah, but to your point, Matt, I think it's understanding that, trusting that this is kind of who I am at core, and there may be times I need to be a little here, and at times certain groups may need me to act like this or to structure things this way, but to trust that at the end of the day, I got to keep coming back to that center of who I am and what makes me feel good and what gives me energy and makes me feel like proud to look in the mirror and not use words I shouldn't use.
Yeah. And the reason why you're there, right? The reason, if you're acting all the time because you think that's what then you're not having fun and you shouldn't be there at all. Yeah. Kukri are a global multi-sport clothing brand specializing in providing the world's most prestigious schools with bespoke made and designed team uniforms for students of all standards and abilities. If you are frustrated by inconsistent colors, branding, costs, and sizing across your school's uniforms, then it's time to discuss an offering where every sport is available from softball to soccer for male and female athletes at rates to suit your budget. To find out how Kukri could elevate the apparel of your student athletes to a professional level, email the team at contact@kukrisports.com. A dedicated sales manager will offer you a quote today. Mention this ad and receive a special offer on your coach or PE staff order. Right, so what's next? Art of Playing Well went well. What's in the hopper? Anything you can give away, or are you just looking forward to meeting us next week and taking Christmas and everything off?
I forgot about Christmas. It's hard to even look ahead beyond NIAAA and the meetup at the Celebration Tavern. And the Celebration Town Tavern, did I tell you that was like my farewell party when I was working for the Bucks? That we finished training camp and we all went across the street from the Celebration Hotel to the Celebration Town Tavern. And then the next day, Coach Gruden threatened to punch me on the field. But we're not going to share that story on the air. Let's just say there was a misunderstanding. And we got it all resolved after that. But yeah, I'm excited about that. No, I've got a couple of interesting things. I'm speaking at the American Baseball Coaches Association in January.
Yeah.
In Dallas, and they've got me. It'll be fun.
Big conference, I think, right?
Yeah. It's a huge. It's so 8,000 or 9,000 attendees is what they're expecting. And so they got me day 2, speaker 2. The UCLA head baseball coach starts things off, and then I follow him. And so I'm excited about that.
Great.
And a couple of other early keynotes in the early part of the year. So
Super.
So some fun stuff. And then I'd like to do, I don't know if it's going to be the art of playing well. It may be the art of playing well, resilience or something. But I'd like to do another one of these where I talk to another 15, 16 people and talk to them about, what are ways you've learned to bounce back? Because that's something that continues to come up.
Yeah.
And anyway, I don't know how often I should do it to not exhaust myself. But these are really fun. And I don't know, maybe I'll be asking you guys in Orlando, having done podcasts every week, and
Right.
what do you guys think? How much is too much, or should I do podcasts instead of summits? But something like that. I really enjoy interacting and getting other people to share.
Yeah, and I think the eclectic mix that you had was cool. Like it was the different backgrounds that you had participated in the interviews was really interesting. So, and the themes, but the differences was really neat.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, good. And it was funny too to hear like basketball coaches say, I had somebody, one of the other speakers say, wow, Katrina Moran from Saigon South International School, when she was talking about paying it forward and that you learn from experience and failure and that you actually owe it to the next generation to share those things. They were like, I couldn't have articulated it that way, but that's what I meant.
Yeah.
So it is cool to see even within the panels to have people talk about, that was really cool what that person shared from halfway around the globe or whatever. So thanks. Appreciate that, man.
Absolutely. Well, great. You mentioned a few things that I mentioned earlier. People around the world already, ADs, because you've gone to EARCOS the last couple of years, as well as some other schools. Tell us about your experience over there and what it's like to really dig into international ADs and work with them.
Yeah. So it started, of course, with us connecting, and then you and Matt having me on this, and then Chris Mott, who actually has a winter home or a seasonal home here in Florida. Chris and I connected right before he moved to Thailand. And so then I started doing work with International School Bangkok with Chris there. And Chris then connected me with the EARCOS folks. And so got to be a part of, and I'm sure all your listeners know what EARCOS is, but I haven't tell everybody, East Asia Regional Council of Schools. See how good I am with that? And being a part of that. And that's been a fascinating thing to be a part of. And the first year I went and worked with, it's primarily with ADs, but then had a talk for general audiences as well. And then this year I did 2 for ADs and then 2 for general audiences. And in fact, my last talk was my most well attended. You would think that though, general audience, there being 1,100 people and only a handful of them are ADs. So, but it was on introverted leadership and talking a bit about. In fact, I used to slide on Brian Shelton and his tennis experience. But it's been great, and it's really great to get to know them, and it's fun. It's kind of like there are 2 parallels to speaking to the military that I have found that you guys may appreciate or may not. And one is, and maybe it's just me with my imposter syndrome, which actually, by the way, I think a lot more of us have than we give credit to. That we get in some situation and think, "What am I doing up here? What happens when they pull back the curtain and see there is no wizard?" I certainly have that from time to time, having come to writing late in life and speaking and all that. But I'm showing up at this conference and I'm going, seriously, I'm going to be talking to these educators just like I thought. I'm going to be talking to the military about some of these topics about team building and whatever. These folks have been running classrooms, running administration, doing whatever, running schools. And they do it in Oman, and then they do it in Hungary, and then they do it in Thailand. And I thought these folks have a lot more to offer on these topics than I do, just like with the military, right? And then you sit there and you find yourself going, you know what? I'm actually bringing a totally different perspective. And I've learned some things along the way. And it may be stuff they know, but they're hearing it with a different voice, with some different terms or some different anecdotes, and maybe something lands there. But I did have that. My wife was laughing. We landed in Bangkok 2 years ago, 2022. We landed. The first thing she said was, you need to be awesome so we can get invited back because this is amazing already. And I'm like, we haven't left the airport yet. And then the second thing she was saying was, because she could tell I was plagued with this self-doubt. And she's like, whoa, you've spoken to the Miami Dolphins, you've spoken to ESPN, you've spoken to corporations here and there. I was like, I know, but I've never spoken, in an educational conference. She's like, you talked at William and Mary. You've talked at Duke and the University of Florida. And I'm like, well, okay, but not international. And so she's like, okay, now you're just making up stuff to worry about. So that was one. The other one was the acronyms that you guys use that are right up there with the military. The military, I guess, has you beat. But it was funny to be at the conference and have people throw things out and everybody nod. And I'm going, I don't even know I have no idea what we're talking about right now. But it's been a great experience and I love doing it. And so from that initial work with ISB and then EARCOS, now I've connected with some other schools, some other folks, and just trying to figure out what makes sense. Because, on the one hand, I would love to travel the globe and meet with everybody in person, which is so easy to do here in the States, or easier, I should say. But trying to figure out a way that makes sense, and maybe it doesn't, and maybe it's all virtual. But Chris and I came up with an 8-session professional development course, and it's everything from, and it's for coaches and staff, but it was everything from dealing with, resilience, helping people change, helping motivate folks, and team building and so forth. So then I just concluded that last week with the International School of Ulaanbaatar.
Nice.
Jeff Coops, who I met at EARCOS, and then Bill Ellman, their head of school, who was on the Art of Playing Well as well. He was also a great interview. And what was nice about Bill was that he would use terms and then he would stop and slow down and explain those terms for me, because I'm like, Bill, I only went to Duke and Harvard and US. I have no idea what you're talking about. And so he would have to take a step back and walk me through it. I know how you Canadians are, Nick.
He explained them for all of us, not just you. So
Bill always has a nice way of massaging things through, though, so that it comes back around and makes sense.
100%. No, and one of the other speakers. I'm going to blow it here. But one of the other speakers said to me that they thought it was beautiful. They said, and that was the word they used. They said it was beautiful the way Bill talked about conatus, right? This term I didn't know, but kind of as I understand it. And so, you guys can correct me the way Bill would have to help guide me back. But our footprint, if you will, in the world and how we're kind of learning and stretching and growing in our sense of who we are, but doing it in a way that benefits others and supplements others and doesn't run over others. And so one of my other speakers from sports said, I listened to Bill and that was beautiful. I love the way he laid it out, but that's something I want to help others understand. So it's really cool when you get these folks from different fields, using different terms, different acronyms, whatever, and you're like, oh, I can totally take that and use that. So it's been a blast.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And I love that you have general sessions too, because I really just don't like, it sounds really bad, but just don't like talking just to ADs and coaches all the time. I really want to spread the message and talk to educators and bring everything together, because sometimes we're in our little boxes and they're in their little boxes. Like, what can an IB biology teacher learn from a middle school soccer coach? Well, probably quite a bit. When you put those two together, there's a lot, and I think we need to connect those things a lot more than we do.
No doubt. And I understand the impetus to have, at least early in the conference, a few things that are kind of set aside for ADs. I mean, I at least understand the theory, but I really do think that as we talk about the integrated whole and we talk about the importance of extracurriculars, that if you want to continue to marginalize sports and the like, as some do intentionally otherwise, I think you lose so many of the values and benefits and growth that can come through that, whether it's sports, art, whatever, trying something new, failing at it, whatever. I mean, that was the safest place for me to fail, right? I mean, the great disappointment of whatever high school sport I was playing or middle school sport, and either losing as a team or losing and playing poorly or winning and playing poorly and dealing with those emotions, right? That I was terrible. Then
the next play you do something great, right? You had that
right. That there's going to be something that comes back around. Totally. I tell folks about the time I was playing in American Legion baseball right after high school, and we played a doubleheader, And I had already committed to go to Duke, and so I was going to be playing baseball. And so I was kind of feeling good about myself. And I went 0 for 6 with 6 errors playing shortstop in the course of this. And it was, and I mean, the next time up, Matt, so after, right, I get a chance to redeem myself, right? Clearly, because I've struck out 6, so it's, strikeout number 1, strike. Well, by strikeout number 4, I get to the plate, I'm done, right? They could have rolled the ball up and I was going to swing feebly at it because I was mentally. And so it was really hard to and I was not able to fight through it that time, but I had to the next game. And the next time out, you start to think back of, I really didn't, I was in such a bad spot emotionally and whatever. And I still look back, right? I was 17, 18, and I'm now 54. So a math person watching this can do the math for me, 36 years or whatever, that I'm looking back on that single day. And it was so dreadful and went, I survived. Right? It was terrible. I was embarrassed. I wanted them to, take me out, and they weren't going to take me out. They were like, good luck, go learn. You're going to figure this out.
Through it.
So I think we learned a lot. And so to the extent, Nick, to your point, I really think it should be, if it was up to me to set the rooms, even when they did have something, they'd put the ADs right in the middle of everybody so that, I just think there should be that sense of, hey, we're all in this together to help kids get ready. All we're trying to do is turn out people who can learn and who are people of character and can navigate their way through challenges. And right, we're hoping to turn these folks loose as adults and say, hey, good luck and Godspeed. And hopefully we gave you some tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've been trying to get you over to a conference in our area, and we'll keep trying. And but maybe the more connections we make together on Friday, will lead to some more schools and more sharing and bringing all those things together. Because can't get enough. That's for sure.
Well, you basically had me at 2024 CISA. So you got it done, and my daughter had to decide to have a wedding that weekend. I know. I don't want to talk about it. I've talked to her about eloping. I've talked to her about postponing.
You have another one, don't you?
How?
Doctor is
I have a whole other daughter.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, hey,
we're cutting this part, right?
Yeah.
Wait, 5 could work because it might be here in Budapest. I don't know. That's the rumor on the streets, but
okay. Okay. Well, good. Well, Kathy and I've been talking about 2025. So, because yes,
make sure you have a good time and see Budapest properly.
Well, good. And I thought I was supposed to say Budapest.
You'll get
okay. Hey, I'm just really proud. I learned it was 2 different cities across the river. Yeah. So I feel like, I'm such the knowledgeable American now. There's so few of us.
Well, Matt only learned that last year anyway, and he's been there for a while. So,
with speakers. Okay, I can count to 3 in Hungarian. Got that going for me.
Perfect. You could order us all a drink, Matt. That'd be great.
That'd be great. That's awesome. One other thing, as long as I'm mentioning it, as far as things I've done, is that I spoke. I did a couple of sessions for kayak, the Korean Association of International. Anyway, KAIAC, the Athletic Association, and so I did 2 sessions with them, and those were really interesting. One was just for athletic directors, and then one was for their student athletes, and so they were both virtual, and so that was really fun. And then part of what I've been doing with Ulaanbaatar is that they've invited me to come over next September-ish. Excuse me, it was going to be February, and then they caught themselves and realized that maybe that was not the time for me to do a lot of sightseeing in Mongolia. But talking about coming over in September, but waiting for a weekend when they've got one of their conferences going on where they're in a new conference with schools from Korea and Japan and elsewhere are in, so that I can talk to some of those other students, athletic directors. So anyway, I love that kind of stuff. This is not, I still have to do the corporate stuff and whatever, and that certainly helps pay the bills. But I love it when I get to talk to kids or people who are influencing kids. I really, again, just love being a part of this podcast, of what you guys do. So I appreciate, again, you guys having me on here and letting me be a part of what you do.
Yeah. Well, definitely look forward to our meetup in Orlando, and connecting with even more international school folks, because there'll be quite a few of them there attending the NIAAA conference and a little more networking and spreading the good word. So thanks again for joining us, Nathan. Appreciate it.
You got it. And I'll be telling my Gruden stories then. We get along fine now.
Until next week, this has been another episode of the Globetrottin ADs.